Now to talk about Turkey, the situation there dominating really international newspapers, of course, that deadly car bomb in Ankara. Claire Williams is here.
Hi, Stuart. Yeah, pictures of the aftermath of that explosion are certainly dominating the Turkish media this morning. Hurriyet's front page reads, "Damn it." We've also got the front page of Zaman with this morning, "Bomb in the heart of the state." That's the headline on the front page of Zaman. It really was in the heart of the state. I mean, the car bomb went off close to Parliament, close to the Prime Minister's office and the Army's headquarters. We've got some news that came into us just recently from the Daily Sabah. Now, that's reporting that the Turkish security forces believe the suicide bomber was Syrian. It's believed he came into Turkey with refugees and had his fingerprints taken at the border. And that's how the police managed to identify him. So that's according to the Daily Sabah. That's breaking news that we just got through recently.
Okay, that's all the headlines out there in Turkey. Meanwhile, in the rest of the papers, the British Prime Minister has gone to Brussels, of course, to try to get all EU member states to agree to the deal that he renegotiated for Britain. What's the British press saying about Cameron's trip, Claire?
Well, it's a really big day for David Cameron, and he's all over the British press, as you can expect. The Guardian says it's got an exclusive access to leaked documents that was sent to EU leaders very early this morning ahead of today's meeting. The Guardian says this document clearly shows the gap between what Cameron wants and what the EU wants is widening, not narrowing. Inside the document, there are lots of what's called square brackets. Now, square brackets are basically they're places in international negotiations where the issue hasn't been agreed upon. So one of these square brackets involves France. France is unhappy about the special protections Cameron wants to secure for the financial district. That's the City of London, of course. Cameron wants countries that don't use the euro to have a greater say on their own financial regulations. Now, another square bracket issue for Eastern European countries is saying they have grave concerns about Cameron's demands to limit welfare payments to new arrivals who come into Britain. The Guardian says Cameron will have a really hard time, though, stepping down on this issue because his ministers back home, a lot of them are Eurosceptic and he can't lose face on this issue.
It does sound like he's going to face some tough questions when he meets up with his ministers again, whether there's a deal or not, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So Cameron's schedule basically is to go back to London on Friday after having this English breakfast with the EU leaders and hold a meeting with his ministers. The Daily Telegraph explains that up until now his ministers have towed the party line, and that's the line of collective responsibility. That means they've not said whether they'll vote for Britain to stay or leave the EU. That's the ministers. But after this meeting, they will be able to come out and say how they feel, whether they want Britain to stay or leave the EU. And we're expecting Cameron to say when that referendum is going to take place. Now, there's a really interesting cartoon in The Independent today. It shows Cameron sort of gleefully looking at his EU renegotiation papers. Well, behind them, there's a scary-looking figure that looks like Boris Johnson as the Mayor of London.
It probably is, yeah.
Now, the Mayor of London hasn't yet said if he will vote for or against Britain staying in the EU. But his vote is really important. He's a bigwig in the Conservative Party. He's the Mayor of London. So for Cameron, Boris Johnson's vote really, really matters. So this cartoon is obviously sort of saying on Cameron's Judgment Day, Boris Johnson is lingering behind him with this kind of frightening presence.
Yes, as he tends to do. Now, you mentioned France. What about Germany? What are the German press saying today?
Well, the German publication Tagesschau says Cameron is playing a dangerous game of poker because he's under so much pressure from within his own party. Spiegel Online is saying Cameron is actually a winner. He's going to go home after his trip to Brussels with almost all of his demands having been met. There'll be tough negotiations, but really he's going to get his own way because the three people with the most power in the EU, that's Angela Merkel, Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, they see the idea of a Brexit as a complete nightmare. So they're going to do everything they possibly can to keep Britain in the EU. And the reason they see Brexit as a nightmare is they feel that if Britain were to leave the EU, Britain's advocacy for free trade is going to wear off and the southern European countries are going to get more influence on how the EU does trade with the rest of the world. So they want to avoid a Brexit at all costs, according to Spiegel Online.
OK, I'm going to move to Silicon Valley now for this next story. A big company there is challenging a powerful US government agency.
Yes, Apple says it's ready to go head-to-head with the FBI.
OK.
So papers in the US are running this story all over the place. Yeah. A federal judge has ordered Apple to help the FBI unlock the iPhone that belonged to Saeed Farook. Now, Saeed Farook was one of the killers in the San Bernardino shooting that we saw last December. Now, iPhones use encrypted technology, which means only the owner can actually unlock their own device. Apple says even if it wanted to, it can't unlock its own devices. But in any case, it doesn't want to, because that would put all of its customers at risk. That's what it says. There's a good opinion piece in the technology website ZDNet by Zach Whittaker, which backs Apple 100%. The FBI should just get on and do with its job. That's not up to companies to spy on people. That's according to Zach Whittaker. The photo that's used in this article, though, I think is quite interesting. Même pas peur. This photo was taken after the attacks in Paris last November.
Yeah.
The author says that intelligence agencies, not just in the US, but in France too, and this is not a Silicon Valley story. This is an issue that's happening in Europe as well. Intelligence agencies are putting pressure on companies to give them what's called backdoors. Now, backdoors help them track down terrorists, and backdoors are basically a way for intelligence agencies to get access to encrypted data. Now, ZDNet says Apple is positioning itself as a protector of privacy for its customers, and we should applaud Apple for this. The argument goes that if government agencies were to have access to encrypted technology, then criminals and terrorists would have access as well. So it's not safe for anyone.
So Apple's saying it's protecting its customers, but it has got its own interests as well, doesn't it?
It certainly does have its own interests. Now, Wired has an article, Apple's noble stand against the FBI is also great business. In Silicon Valley, a company's success can be made or broken on its ability to protect customer data. US companies have a lot of work to do. Edward Snowden showed that US companies had given backdoors to the FBI. And so US companies are trying to show the world that their customers' data is safe. And basically Wired is saying Apple is protecting customers' privacy, but it's also protecting its bottom line.
Of course, there's always two sides to every story, aren't there? Isn't there? Claire, thanks very much. Claire Williams with the International Paper.